Welcome back to Cyber for Hire, the Managed Security Podcast. Once again, I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media. In the first half of our show, we talked with Mike Hamilton at Critical Insights about populating the talent pipeline through professional development opportunities. Right now, I'd like to welcome back my co-host Ryan Morris from Morris Management Partners, because it's time for us to examine our InfoSec news and trends topic of the week, presenting our big idea in security: work from anywhere, securing the blurry edges of your network. In the last few years, many companies have found that their home offices and their internal on-prem networks are no longer always the central core around which their business operations revolve. Even with more employees returning to the office now, remote and hybrid workforce models are here to stay, thanks to an exponentially increased reliance on cloud-based architecture and services, as well as edge computing practices that allow for the processing of key data closer to remote edge devices. All of which means that critical data and business functions are constantly taking place right at the network's edge, a perimeter that these days is becoming difficult to define. In this segment, we'll just examine how cybersecurity models must adapt in order to accommodate this recent shift in network dynamics and architecture. And so, Ryan, once again, we're going to jump right to the heart of things, as we always do. I want to hear from you on why has the network edge become so difficult to define, and ultimately, because of that, protect?
See, we touched on it earlier in our conversation with Mike, and he indicated, there's a lot of people whose core cybersecurity philosophy is buy a bunch of firewalls, build a great big fence around the edge, and we're fine, right? Everything is going to be good. And we learned a long time ago, no, that's not okay. But the philosophy of perimeter defense has persisted. It's something that we all like to think, this is my building, these are my resources, owned, controlled, managed by us. Therefore, we ought to be in more control of these assets than we could be in any uncontrolled or public computing environment. That defies logic in a modern world. I buy into the philosophy of locationless computing. I subscribe to cloud services. I store stuff here and there. I utilize all of this remote technology, and I don't care where it is physically located, at least within legal and regulatory bounds, right? That is the new context of computing. And I think we've arrived at a world where the perimeter is essentially infinite, especially when you send actual employees with corporate data, with secure communication requirements into the hither and yon, right? When that happens, it didn't start with the pandemic, it accelerated with the pandemic. I personally have not worked in an office, like 9-to-5 job, since like 1999 or 98, something like that. Whether it was I had a territory responsibility, a field job, I travel to client locations and get on stages and stuff like that. I started remote working when it was dial-up modems and text-based emails where attaching a photo was a serious no-no because it was going to knock the network out, right? We've evolved tremendously with the caliber of connectivity, but I think from a cybersecurity professional's point of view, we have to just make a baseline mental shift. There is no perimeter. And the perimeter does not exist. We need a new philosophy for how to manage cybersecurity, and then figure out how to keep people productive and doing good work, irrespective of where they happen to be sitting physically at the moment.
So explain where specifically are problems going to start to significantly surface for those organizations that are still relying on classic network architectures, perimeter-based architectures. Where are the biggest flaws and problems starting to bubble up? And and becoming obsolete because of today's realities of so much going on at the edge. And then, sort of as part two of that question, then explain how can you then modernize that situation or help your clients, if you're an MSSP, modernize accordingly.
See, and to your second point there, this is It is a technical challenge to be secure in an everywhere computing world, but that means it's a tremendous opportunity for MSSPs. This ought to be the single best market driver that leads to sales opportunities for service providers like us. This is a catalyst for consuming our services, because the complexity that is created by people doing things, important things, not just, kind of browsing the web, but doing their jobs from everywhere, that's beyond the skill set of most end user organizations, especially those that are in a traditional perimeter architecture. We are more important, more indispensable to this opportunity than ever before. The good news is there are technologies and there are solutions that can do this. See, I think the first challenge that you were focused on, where things go wrong, is lack of standardization. It's a question of, we have one local facility where we designed the network, we beta tested all of the components and devices, we engineered all of these protocols, and therefore we ought to know what's going on. But then you put somebody in their house, somebody in a coffee shop, somebody in a hotel room someplace else, and a thousand iterations in between. There is zero standardization of architecture or even endpoint devices, right? We get to that network edge and wireless APs become an absolute smorgasbord. Just at the simplest level of architecture, it's like somebody has one from the cable company, somebody bought one at Best Buy, somebody else has one that their neighbor recommended who works in IT. There's absolutely too much variety in this world. So what we have to do is to adopt a philosophy of controlling what we can control. And where an MSP might be keen to standardize some of their internal tools, the way that we manage our clients' environments, right? Our PSA, our RMM, our monitoring tools, and all of the other technologies for cybersecurity, we tend to standardize those things internally. We need to impose that kind of philosophy on the endpoint to the degree that it's possible, right? We may find that for mobile people who it's not just remote work, but it's many different locations of remote at various times, there are things beyond your control. So we can standardize endpoint devices and VPNs and login credentials and MFA and all of that stuff, right? Control what you can control and then admit that there are things beyond your control. I think this might be the best justification for a zero trust philosophy that we will come across. It's not just that it's a broad threat surface. It's not just that it's a complex attack environment. It is that we literally don't know the brand and the configuration and the patch status of 1,000 pieces of physical hardware between us and our people. And that's something that we just all have to embrace. Therefore, wherever we can control it, we need to be in control of just everything is shut down, deny by default. Then let's start to work on our internal approved environment and allow people in as is necessary to do our jobs.
In terms of modernizing solutions to accommodate the activity going on at the network edge, one of the concepts that you hear bandied about a lot lately, and it goes a little bit hand in hand with the zero trust principles that you were just talking about before and espousing, is SASE. And so, and that's a burgeoning concept that also kind of goes along with the concept also of a software-defined wide area network. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts a little bit on how things are trending in this space. If you're seeing this start to really prove itself as a viable methodology for helping to protect these as you said, almost infinite networks that where the perimeter is disappearing. And so, what are your thoughts on SASE?
See, I absolutely buy the philosophy. from the roots of the software defined world, that is an opportunity to define a configuration irrespective of the environment, right? The whole virtualization concept allows us to say, whatever platform I am running on, whatever devices may be attached, whatever other things I either can't control or literally don't even know about, that's all fine, because within the walls of my virtual environment, I can control the data, I can control the transit, I can control access and the actual utilization of information resources, right? So I buy that philosophy, and I think what you're seeing in the world right now, tale of two cities, right? Those organizations that have legit cyber capabilities or are partnered with an actual professional MSSP, those environments are absolutely adopting that kind of technology. It's not rocket science, but it is advanced and it is effective. The other side of the street, however, either small businesses that don't have on-staff resources or they don't pay for a professional service like an MSSP, those that don't perceive the mission critical nature of cybersecurity, they're just still disappointing and disturbing numbers of wide open networks out there in the world. That we chuckle all the time. It's like, come on, just turn on MFA. It's not that hard, right? And yes, you do have to do a second step to get into your email. And every sales guy and CEO in the world, just suck it up. You're going to have to do those kinds of things, right? It's not that hard. It's simple technology that makes a major improvement. I think that the network design philosophy in a virtual environment takes a little work to configure. There is some administration going forward, but I think it's not like the payback of effort to reward in this situation it's a phenomenal return on investment. I think what it does is it leads me, like, if you defined it as philosophies, right? Originally we secured devices, and then we designed systems, and then we've been moving lately to the concept of data centric cybersecurity. I think the step that is correct in this work from anywhere world is human centric, right? Like, don't define me by my laptop and my smartphone and which directories I have access to and what is normal acceptable behavior for when I log in and download things. Like, I get that from a systems design point of view. But humans have functional responsibilities. And when technology prevents them from doing their job, people find workarounds. And the last thing we need is to manufacture a new generation of remote workers who say, yeah, your cybersecurity controls are cute, but I found my own way to get around all of that stuff and still be able to do my job, right? We all know there's certain jobs that can be done remote and certain that can't. There are certain that should be done within the four walls, and there's certain that it's totally okay to do them from wherever. I think the pendulum is swinging in the direction of wherever. We do finance work, we do cybersecurity work, we do R&D, we share like legitimate intellectual property assets from people in their living rooms, in hotels, in coffee shops, everywhere. When IT is a business prevention function and we make it so people can't do their jobs, that's when people go rogue and leave us in the dust. When we are there designed around the human, when it's human centric and we know what their function is and what devices and what resources they need access to, I think we can become an enabler. We are a business multiplying function, not a prevention function. And not only is that a more robust way to secure our environments, but quite frankly, it's way more popular in the non-technical world, right? Your CFO, your CEO, your VP of sales who roll their eyes whenever the cyber guys walk in the room, like, oh, here we go again. We feel that we are not being taken seriously because we're the nag in the corner going, you guys aren't doing it correctly. We can get on the same side of the table and we can make them more effective when we design it around the human and the role, as opposed to the device, the system, and the data. So I think that's going to be a philosophical shift for the industry, but we're already seeing cool technology to enable human-centric cybersecurity. So I don't think it's fantasy land out there in the 2, 3, 4 year future. I think it's here now. We just need to explore the philosophy.
Final question before we wrap, Ryan, which is that if you are an organization that is doing human identity based perimeter right, basically going off of the philosophy as you just prevented it, then to what extent does it really matter at all what devices are being used as endpoints? Because we talked a little bit about the concept of, we're seeing also more, edge computing where more of the processing power that's taking place sometimes happens closer to the device in the core network. So maybe then in some ways makes the device more important. But if you're otherwise doing this philosophy, like you just said, then maybe it still isn't. So I'd be curious to just hear your thoughts on, again, if they kind of follow the program as you just laid it out, then does it really matter which or how many devices or how disparate the devices are that are being used?
As long as they are functionally connectable and can pass data back and forth, the device literally doesn't define the environment anymore. And that's true, again, at the edge, the endpoint, as well as in the network protocol, as well as in the network core in the data center, right? We grew up in a world of proprietary technology platforms, whether it was operating system, application interfaces, et cetera. Technology companies imposed proprietary boundaries. My technology is only compatible with my technology. Once you buy one of my devices, you are locked in for the future, and you must buy all of my other devices. That is absolutely ancient thinking, and data is transferable. I believe that when you get cybersecurity right from the human into the environment and around the data that is shared, we can get to a world where you want to drive a PC, I want to drive a Mac, you want to use this phone, somebody else uses that phone. We have different wireless protocols, we have different network protocols, etc. Standards exist, right? Like we have an IEEE function in the industry for a reason, for transportability, for compatibility. It exists, and I think that's another generational shift that is going to blow the minds of very many senior engineers in the cyber world, right? We were born and bred in a compatibility mindset. Everything's compatible with everything when it is hosted in the cloud and it lives in a browser window, and data formats are universally transferable and applications have APIs, right? Everything can connect to everything. Which one do you want to use? And by the way, that is not counterintuitive to my concept of standardization, right? I'm not saying standardize the device. I'm saying standardize the platform protocols in that virtual software defined environment. And then you could log in on whatever you can connect to a network. That's fine, right? I don't think that's anywhere near the biggest problem that we have in cybersecurity anymore. And it does free us to build some like very heterogeneous environments that are driven by functional requirements or economic realities, right? Like, I don't need to buy the most expensive thing in the world just because everything in my data center and my network happens to be one color or another. Let's move into a world of let's use the best device for the specific human function and then connect it virtually on software. I don't think that's a problem anymore. All right, guys, that's our thought process on the work from anywhere world of cybersecurity. What do you think? We would love to get your thoughts and some input. So reach out to us on our email address, cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com. Visit our show page, drop in some comments. We love to get that kind of interaction from the audience. So let us know what your thoughts are. Right now, we want to shift into our next segment, which is our relationship management opportunity. We get to be the human counselors that broker these relationships between MSPs and their clients. We call this segment Dear Cyber for Hire. We are focused on a real issue that absolutely exists out there in the world, but we've anonymized the names and the participants to protect the innocent. So with that setup, Bradley, what do we need to know in the world of cyber relationships right now?
All right. Well, I'll tell you, Ryan, because we are back with even more juicy MSSP melodrama. And this one comes from the provider side of the relationship. So, fellas, cue the music. Dear Cyber for Hire, enough already. I've been trapped in a never ending engagement with my partner to be, and it seems as if they'll never be ready to take that next big step. Could it be my would be client is getting cold feet? I'd hate to lose them after everything I've invested into making this relationship work. Our pre-sales engineering team has already spent many hours responding to the company's repeated requests for different solution packages, configurations, and pricing quotes. Yet we just can't get past the proposal stage. At some point, we need to set a date. Time to sign the dotted line. Impatiently yours, perturbed by postponed, prolonged, and protracted prospective partnership in Pensacola. Ryan, what's a reasonable amount of work for a prospective client to ask of your sales and pre-sales engineering teams? And at what point do you consider them a tire kicker? And finally, for those who maybe are legitimately on the fence, what's the best way to inch them toward a commitment?
See, this is a massive problem. Recent research that we've participated in looking at, we'll call it activity-based accounting, right? Like your people in a service organization in the cybersecurity world, what activities do they do? How long do they take? How many units can they complete, right? We worked up with an organization that was doing some research to get right down to the 15-minute increment level of what do service professionals do with their time. It was an interesting thing in terms of managing productivity and setting KPIs for productivity. We can tie that back into the organizational efficiency, right? I think that's a very good idea. One of the really interesting things that we learned through the side of that research was that the fastest growing category of time allocation in a pre-sales, post-sales blended environment is just reconfiguring and requoting, right? The customer comes back and says, okay, so I know I asked for this vendor, now let's look at this vendor. And I know I said I wanted this stack of technology and this configuration, and now I want to look at it a different way. It is mind-blowing how long it can take to just come up with a new configuration and quoting. God bless our friends in distribution in the industry who are trying to streamline that process and make it easier to create complex quotes and configuration with all their design tools and such. That's progress. But I think it's less a technical problem and more a human problem that is imposed on the environment. I think it is a question of we're trying to get to the altar too quickly before we have qualified whether this committed relationship is even interesting to the other party. I believe it begins with the sales organization to qualify these deals and identify decision-making authority and precipitating events, budget authorization and availability, the fact that they actually have money, political and organizational dynamics that lean into the momentum for making a decision. We have to be much better disciplined about the question of sales qualification. And then we have to be willing, as an industry, as individual organizations, to actually believe in the value of our intellectual property and the work that we do. You're familiar with the idea in the legal industry, right? First consultation is free. Is the second consultation with a lawyer ever free? No, it's not. Now, what's the difference between the work that a lawyer does and the work that a cybersecurity organization does in situation analysis, in design configuration, the pre-sales engineering, the quoting? What's the difference in our work and their work? Is it that they do stuff that's valuable and we don't? No. Is it that they do things that are technically complicated and we do things that are simple? No, it is absolutely not that difference. Is the difference between they get to charge for pre-sales activities and we do them for free, is that just a self-confidence question? Or is that just a, well, that's the way it's always been done around here, so, why rock the boat kind of a question at an industry level? I think it is an industry maturity factor. Lawyers have been around forever, right? And they figured out a long time ago that if you don't force somebody to be serious and consider their financial commitments in this process, if you don't force them to do that, man, they will eat your cycles for hours and days and just bleed you for free advice. Guess what? Customers of cybersecurity services and all other professional services are those exact same kinds of humans. They will bleed you dry if you do not impose the structure of value and financial commitment into it. Now, the pushback, that I get every time I give that piece of advice to a services organization is, well, none of our competitors do it, so how could we possibly get there? You can't charge for pre-sales work in the technology industry. My answer to that is, maybe you can't, but it can be charged for. It's a question of standardization. It's a question of packaging. It's a question of the confidence with which we can present our expertise and our easy access to pre-designed and trusted solutions. It's the opposite of, it's a really hard situation. We're going to bring our smartest people in here and we're going to figure it out. And then you will buy something from us. Opposite engineering, right? We need to believe in the value that we bring to these relationships. We need to impose a free consultation, and then you're actually using the brain power of our expensive human beings, so you don't just get free access to those people. And then we need to admit that might make tire kickers walk away and go to our competitors. And you know what I would say in that situation? Thank you very much. I would much rather have somebody who's going to bleed me dry for free advice. I'd rather have them walk away today than in 6 months after I've finally gotten exhausted by those requests, right? It begins with self-belief. What you do is valuable. It's hard. You went to school for a lot of years to learn how to do a pre-design and an engineering config and a price quote on this technology. If it's hard, if it's valuable, charge for it.
All right. Great advice. As always, Ryan, another relationship saved. Hopefully, our listeners have learned from this and don't make the same mistake. And remember, if you've been struggling with your managed security services relationship, whether you're the user or the provider, we want to hear from you. So please write to us at cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com, and we might use your letter in a future episode. In the meantime, as any security practitioner can tell you, there's no shortage of headlines filling up the cyber news feeds every single day. So we wanted to highlight a few items that we curated just for you in this lightning round that we call the Security Detail. And headline number 1 goes to you, Ryan. Industrial security vendors are collaborating on a new intel sharing initiative focused on critical infrastructure threats. Tell us more.
I think this is a very good example of how nature will find a way, right? You remember that line from the Jurassic Park movies. Life will find a way. There's so many threat vectors, so many attack surfaces, so many technologies that it's very hard to create standards in this environment, at least from the vendor side, because the vendor wants to be universally compatible with everybody, and they don't want to have configuration changes from one vertical to another. So the industry is doing it themselves. And I think this is it's critical infrastructure, so it's really important, but it's also a very good example of how even competitors can collaborate when we get down to things that are super important, right? So we're linking to an article from the folks over at Cyberscoop, and it's focused on a platform that's emerging called Ethos, which is the emerging threat open sharing environment. And it's designed to eliminate the proprietary communications or information sharing boundaries that might exist. And it is demonstrated to dramatically accelerate the awareness of and the response times to emerging threats in a critical security environment. I think this is a great example. Many industries, I'm thinking financial services, healthcare, et cetera, could probably also learn some lessons here. This is something that I think is a very positive development. So let's encourage this path of action, and let's see if we can't get more industries to go this direction. Headline number 2 to you, Bradley. Papercut servers exploited to download remote management software on victims' networks. What do we need to know?
All right. Well, this ties back in pretty nicely, actually, to the big idea discussion that we just had, Ryan, because sometimes when you're trying to accommodate a remote workforce, the threat lies not always on the network edge, but sometimes within the network core on, let's say, an application server. So Papercut, for those who don't know, is a popular cloud-based print management software solution that allows employees to work from any device at any location and remotely print out a document at their company's home office. Researchers at Trend Micro initially discovered and reported 2 vulnerabilities, which adversaries are now exploiting in unpatched internet-exposed servers in order to compromise them with the unapproved RMM software. Now, the latest research from Microsoft has attributed these attacks to a Russian actor linked with the Clop and Lockbit ransomwares. So, as always, get patching. Headline number 3, back to you, Ryan. Microsoft's Edge browser is leaking the websites that users are visiting to its Bing search engine.
So, in a world of artificial intelligence that is based on large language models that are trained on publicly available data, this rises now from that's an annoying thing that people know what's going on to mission critical status, right? So there is a function in the Edge browser that is, it's called follow creator, and it's turned on by default. Call to action, everybody that uses this or has it deployed anywhere in their operating environment, please go in and turn that function off. Now, I get what it was intended to do. It's another one of these internet assumption protocols that says, I can give you a better experience if I know where you go so that I can profile you and serve you up more relevant information and ads. That's nice. But when you tell the entire world where we go, that creates a pattern that is available to be analyzed to expose competitive threats, proprietary intellectual property threats, and even some of the mergers and acquisitions data that goes on in this world. It's amazing how you can use this information for illicit purposes. And it's just turned on. And by the way, now it's going to be part, if it goes to Bing in an AI-enabled world, it's going to be part of everybody's large language model. So ChatGPT, etc., are going to have an opportunity to analyze you and then just spit it back out to the wide world in an automated fashion. Not cool. That is something that we need to turn off. So please, let's be paying attention to our browsers again. Next one, headline number 4 for you, Bradley. Google Authenticator unveils 2FA code sync with a catch. What is the catch?
Patience, Ryan. We'll get there. It's been a long-awaited feature for this popular authentication application. Users can now ensure that their one-time 2FA passwords are backed up to their Google accounts such that multiple devices are supported. Now, this is important because if you lose the only device that holds the codes, then it can be very difficult to gain access to your 2FA protected accounts. As a journalist who once or twice in the past has had trouble gaining access to my authentication app protected content management system to file a story because my phone with the one-time codes went dead, for example, I can understand that pain and the convenience that syncing syncing brings to the table. However, we mentioned there's a catch, right? So, Bleeping Computer reported that researchers at MISC warned against leveraging the new feature because the secrets are not end-to-end encrypted while being uploaded to Google servers, which means Google can see the secrets. And if there's a breach or a leak caused by an employee, then that information could fall into the wrong hands. Now, Google, for its part, said that it plans to also roll out end-to-end encryption for this feature. The company says they've been cautious so far about doing so because if you lose your key and password, you could get locked out without a lot of viable options to then go back and access it. So when the time comes, perhaps there will end up being a choice that companies and users will have to make. Enhance their Google Authenticator protections at the risk of being locked out if something happens and they lose the key, or continue to live without the sync feature. And so that finally, Ryan, takes us to, drumroll please, our irrelevant news item of the week. And this is a real news pitch that Ryan or I have received in our inboxes for reasons that are entirely inexplicable to us. Are you ready, Ryan?
Always ready for these.
All right, well, here goes. Hi, Bradley. A new report asked Americans what they really prefer when it comes to renting a vacation property, along with their good and not so good experiences. For instance, 1 in 4 Americans have actually found a camera in their vacation rentals. Yes. Additionally, 74% believe it is unfair for hosts to ask guests to clean before leaving, and 69% of respondents are less likely to rent a property if a host has strict rules. Now, as usual, I have some thoughts here, and I want to hear yours too, Ryan. First of all, there is, of course, a lesson here about privacy. I guess when in doubt, assume there may be a camera on you when you're staying in someone's home. 2, if you make a big mess, in my opinion, you should be cleaning it up. The cleaning fee they're charging you is for standard cleaning, okay? Not for like you leaving a trail of orange cheese doodle crumbs and fingerprints all over the couch. Ryan, do you have thoughts on any of this? Have you ever had any weird or unsettling experiences staying in a vacation rental home? Or any strange rules or restrictions or unpleasant discoveries?
See, as a person who travels a lot and stays in very many destinations, I'm a big fan of the vacation rental philosophy. That sharing economy and the technology that underlies it, I think is a brilliant advancement for humankind. I think it's great. I also happen to be like, lifetime platinum level in a couple of different hotel branded environment programs. And I can tell you that it's often just a question of a better lived experience, right? Sometimes it's nice to stay in a hotel, but other times it's nice to have a kitchen, and it's nice to kind of be in a home and not just in the corporate neighborhoods that are constructed around a lot of these destination downtowns, right? So I'm a big advocate of this, but I'm also a zero tolerance person for shenanigans like putting cameras inside the rental property. I understand that it has been explained that some people do this because, we don't want to see any damage, and we want to monitor for parties, and we want to be able to, have a paper trail, if you will, a digital record of bad behavior if things get damaged. I understand your rationalization. Find a different way. Cameras inside a rental property, not cool, and something that will actually get you sued in many jurisdictions. So don't do that. I will say, to your point, however, I've had some funky experiences in rental properties, some in the domestic environment, some internationally. Stuff goes on out there. And, when you go to a branded hotel, same towels, same shampoo, same bed linens, consistency can be a good thing. Sometimes it's the surprises that make vacation properties really fun. Sometimes surprises with critters or resident pets, for example, or things that are not maybe as sanitary as you wish that they might have been. I have had some experiences, and I have learned. We refer to the phenomenon as lying with photography. It's amazing how well, with a camera and some digital editing, you can make just about any environment look homey and inviting.
Yeah.
Be
or
a
bigger,
discerning consumer.
or like
Yes.
bigger, like the pool that looks like, it's this amazing lagoon is actually just a tiny little,
Yeah.
concrete trench,
Yeah,
that
lying
they're,
with photography, that's
yes.
not nice, and hosts need to stop that stuff. But I do still think that it is a burgeoning part of the human experience. I think that large corporations have been telling us what is acceptable for hospitality for a lot of years, and most of us are not quite 1,000% satisfied with that stuff, right? Let's bring that back to the masses. Let's crowdsource the concept of hospitality. I believe that will lead to much better experiences than what we are allowed to have in a corporate hotel.
All right. No weird experiences of mine that I can think of, at least off the top of my head. Although I do sometimes wonder when you go to one of those vacation homes and they say you have access to everything except this room. Do not go in this room, which always makes me think, okay, well, that's where the bodies are stuffed. Or, if not maybe quite that extreme, it's probably a room filled like floor to ceiling with like stuff that they didn't know what to do with. And if I open the door, I'm going to be like buried in an avalanche of junk that's
Yes,
just going to come,
yes. Junk without a home and
fly.
spare paper towels and hand soap, right? Like
Exactly.
but human nature, right? You put a lock on a door and say, "Don't go in there." Now I want to go in
And I want
there,
to go
right?
in
Like
there.
that's just the nature of humans. So let's be careful and let's be polite to the owner and the host and not snoop in their stuff. But
That's right.
you want to.
That's right. It's like telling a malicious hacker, you can't go in there. But speaking of vacation rentals, it's time for us to check out, Ryan, because we've run out of time. But don't worry, we'll be back again for episode number 20. Meanwhile, feel free to check out even more cybersecurity podcast content on the SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E websites. Until next time, I'm Bradley Barth.
And I am Ryan Morris, and we again would love to hear from you guys to keep this conversation going. So send us your comments, your questions, your thoughts on what we got right and other ideas we didn't get right. You can reach us at cyber4hire at cyberriskalliance.com and our show page, and then we will keep this conversation going on the next episode of Cyber for Hire, your inside source for cyber outsourcing.